agenda? Perfect.
Yes.
And I think TJ just joined as well. So now we have 5 of the 6 that are attending.
Okay.
We are recording and live, so good to go about this.
Okay. Bill, you can, the ball's in your court. Start when you feel comfortable.
Okay, well, I'm comfortable. All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the East Franklin Review Board to order. First of all, staff, please identify yourselves.
Yes, Belkis Schoenhall, Senior Planner.
Judy Box.
Judy, you're not staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'll be the only one speaking, so I'm the only one that needs to be sworn in.
Okay, and Belkis, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Okay, call roll, please.
Okay. Dr. Box,
Present.
Mr. Egner. All right. Mr. Fergus,
Here?
Mr. Manfred,
Present.
Mr. Szymanski,
Present.
and Mr. Way.
Present.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, we have a quorum. Okay, announcement. This is a public forum. Persons wishing to address the commission or the review board, in this case, on matters not on the posted agenda are invited to do so. However, the review board is not able to undertake extended discussion or act on non-agenda items. Communication should be kept to a 3-minute limit. We'll move on to approval of the minutes. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from the last meeting? And if so, are there any additions or corrections? And if not, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Seconded.
All right. Elk has been moved and seconded. Call roll, please.
Yes. Dr. Box,
Approve.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred,
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski,
Approve.
and Mr. Way.
Approve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to new applications. Our first new application is EF 21-06003, 401 West Rich Street. The owner is CMHA. The applicant is Andrew Lundberg, and we are reviewing the Slingshot sculpture. Belkis, staff report, please.
Yes, so 401 West Rich Street is the site of the board-approved Lucas Street Plaza in the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The applicant is seeking approval for the installation of a sculpture monument to sit on the already approved Lucas Plaza platform. So the sculpture is approximately 20 feet tall. It's a slingshot, which is not slingable, to be installed on top of an approved concrete platform. And the slingshot will incorporate LED lighting around the profile of the sculpture, which will be on a timer and 2 spotlights, which will not emit light past the top of the sculpture. And the submittal includes a site plan, elevations, and materials. So in looking at the materials, the first page here, I'll zoom in a little bit. But here, outlined in black, is the Lucas Street Plaza. And then if you zoom closer, you see outlined in red the slingshot, which is sort of pointed to be, you know, as if you were to be slung eastward. And then on the next page here, here's sort of a rendering of the slingshot sculpture. You see the 2 spotlights there on the platform, and then you see in white, that's the LED lighting of the profile of the slingshot. And then next, you have another view of the slingshot, a couple different profiles with the dimensions of it. And then lastly, you have the materials of the lighting. So you have the spotlight and then the LED lighting that goes in the profile. So after review, the proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan envisions East Franklinton as a district that celebrates creativity and art, which is consistent with the proposal sculpture. Staff recommends the board discuss the sculptural lighting, as the plan recommends, and it encourages lights to be directed downward. And staff supports the proposal and recommends approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Belkis. Any questions for staff? If not, would the
Belkis,
applicant like
I guess
to identify? Go ahead.
I had one quick one. How does this fit into the previously approved kind of pocket park that is here? Is this the same location that we've reviewed earlier?
Yeah, it's the same location. They put into it on Google here. Okay. Okay, so this is Lucas Street, my arrow mouse, and then at the terminus of Lucas Street right here, this is the plaza area that was previously reviewed and approved by the board. So the slingshot, or the concrete platform has been approved, and so basically the difference now is they want to install this slingshot piece on top of that concrete platform, put the two spotlights in there.
Shelter right down the street.
Okay, any other questions?
Belkis, I just want to make a point that if you go back to the site plan, I think you can see that's the plinth that they had presented last time. It looks,
Yeah.
as I remembered, it's very similar to that with the steps on each side, and there's a wall, I guess, facing towards the intersection. So yeah, so the addition is just the slingshot to the platform that had already been, and the plaza that had already been designed, right?
Okay, that's kind of what I wanted to confirm.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone else? All right, do we have a representative for the applicant?
That's me, Andrew Lundberg.
Okay, before you begin, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, I do.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, we're hoping to obviously get this approved. We're looking for height on this. The 20-foot, I think, represents a pretty good way to show this off. The nice thing about this sculpture overall is that it's interactive, meaning we're hoping people can sit in the sling, give photos of themselves looking like they're being launched into the city. That's one of the reasons we like this concept. The thing that needs to be described a little bit is that there is a concrete hand that's holding the slingshot. You can see it on the prior photo. It holds the slingshot back a little bit, and it'll hold it at the appropriate height. So somebody will get their hips right about in that area to look like they're flung. Plus, I think it actually adds a little bit to allow other people to stand around and be part of the photo too. And that's concrete. The lighting, I think, will be nice. It'll have a nice difference between day and night, the profile lighting. We realize the light pollution, that you can't go up, you can't go straight up, and obviously there's issues with that. We're hoping we can light it up towards the top with the landscaping lights and allow the LEDs to light the profile.
Okay.
And then obviously we cap it off with the established 1797, just as a wink to Franklinton.
All right. Any questions for the applicant?
I have one. I think if you're clarifying that these are on the last page, these are kind of landscaping lights, so they're not going to be heavy floods. I don't really see a problem with the minimal wattage going up to light that. I think, to your point, I think a lot of the photographs being taken are going to be in evening hours and after dark. I would almost suggest duplicating the one in the back to light the saddle, the pouch, so that if somebody's taking a photo after dark, the person that's sitting in there is actually lit as well.
That's a good idea. And we could back them up. We could put one in front, one in the other, and back them up into a nice little box. That's a good idea. You're right. Yep. I'm with you on that.
Other than that, I love it. I think it's great.
All right, Kim?
Yeah, I absolutely love the idea. You guys like knocked it out of the park. I think this would be really, really cool. I do have to say though, I wasn't paying attention to the hand until you just, in fact, I didn't know what it was. I couldn't really make it out when I looked at it before. And I almost like it without the hand, that just the strap just sitting there and you can see somebody kind of backing up to it. And I don't know if the hand and the fingers are like integral to the whole idea, but I'm not sure you need them.
Well, one thing to that point real quick is that we designed it differently to begin with, where we just had like a pole coming down that because the height is about 2 feet, 2.4. In this way, it allows the slingshot to have a reason to be up in the air a little bit. We thought it seated it and made it make more sense. Plus, I also like the human component of it, allowing it not to be just like a amusement park ride, but allowing it to be a little more sculptural with a fine art hand.
Yeah, I get that, and I don't really, I guess I don't object to it, but it just, when I just saw the pocket for the, what you would put a stone or something, just it's like there's a certain kind of tension that it creates, which is really kind of cool. And the hand kind of just then all of a sudden takes that tension away. And again, it's up to you guys, but I mean, this is what this is the type of art Franklinton needs. So I think it's great.
So
to speak to that tension real quick, the idea, and it's really important to me in this, is that if you look at the side profile, you'll see that it bends over about 20%. So it should look like it's just about ready to go. So adding that tension and keeping that, I think, is really important for the overall essence of this, to have it feel like it's ready to go, Yeah.
Sounds good.
What are the slingshot cables made of? Because I'm assuming the hand is also help grounding, because that's on the actual brick pavers or whatever, helping to support the whole structure, I assume, as well.
That's true. It's 3/16 steel plate. And the biggest thing is obviously not allowing them to wave. They have to be sturdy and strong, and they become a structural element because it helps hold up the, and that's why the hand does make sense there too. But you're right. It is structural.
Is there any concern about needing this thing to be grounded or have lightning rods or anything? I'm, not being an electrical engineer, but with two long metal planks, 20 feet in the air, somebody's butt sitting in one. Is there any kind of a concern in that?
That's a good call, and I will ask the structural engineer about that and see what the overall thought is on that. The slingshot itself is PVC, but you're right. It's painted steel. The straps are, so that's something I'll mention to him to see what makes sense. It's still lower than the buildings surrounding it. So, I mean, if lightning's coming in, I imagine, it hits the highest point. So I don't think we're going up and above that, but yeah, you're right. I'll definitely reach out to the engineer.
Okay, anyone else? If not, I'd entertain a motion and add in that we, in our motion, I think we're going to want to give staff the ability to approve additional lighting through staff approval, so that if you do want to do what TJ suggested, staff will have the ability to approve that. Anybody? You're gonna make me do the motion.
No, I'll do it. Motion to approve with staff ability to work with the lighting.
Great.
Okay. Have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Been
Who
moved
was
and
that?
seconded to approve. That's TJ.
Who seconded?
TJ.
Okay, thank you. Got it.
Okay. Call the roll, please.
Yes, Dr. Bach,
Approve.
Mr. Egner, are you here? No? Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred,
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski,
Approve.
and Mr. Way.
Approve.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Lundberg.
Thank
Okay,
you very
moving
much.
on. Application EF 21060004, address 188 McDowell Street. Chris Sherman is the owner and Wild Goose Creative is the applicant. And we are reviewing Wild Goose Creative graphics. Belka, staff report, please.
Yes, so you scroll down. Yep, so 188 McDowell Street is the home to Wild Goose Creative within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The applicant is seeking approval for 2 wall signs for their building. The first sign is on the front or east elevation and is a non-illuminated, about 23 square foot hand-routed rectangular wood oak sign. And the second is on the rear or west elevation and is a non-illuminated, about 6 square foot routed and painted steel plate sign in the shape of a goose. And so here are their materials. So this is existing, just how the building looks right now with the front and then the rear. And then here are the proposed signs. So you have the oak sign here on the front facade. And then here is the routed steel goose on the rear elevation. And after a staff review, the proposal is consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends that signs be pedestrian oriented, reflect the creative character of East Franklinton, and that storefront signs not exceed 25 square feet. And so as the proposal meets these recommendations, staff recommends approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Belkis. Any questions for staff? If not, I see Mr. Sherman, one of our frequent flyers, is here today. Is there anybody with you, Chris?
Yes, we have Aaron and Lydia. Who
Okay.
are the applicants.
Aaron, Lydia, please identify yourselves.
I'm Lydia. I'm the Executive Director of Wild Goose Creative.
Okay.
I'm Aaron, and I'm a friend and attender of Wild Goose events.
Okay, fair enough. Then Chris, Aaron, Lydia, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
I do.
I do.
Thank you. Floor is yours.
Whoever wants to start. This is your show today. I'm just.
Aaron, do you want to go through the sign?
Yeah. So basically, with the new location, we want to make it obvious where everybody is going. If you look at the addition on McDowell Street, one thing to note, that sort of corrugated metal will come down. Another one of our board members will be working on the construction of the sign. So that's how we came up with the materials, based on being able to reuse some existing materials that we have access to. It's basically just panels that are going to be joined together and attached to a plywood backer panel with construction adhesive. It is 112 inches wide by 30 inches high. And then the letters are hand routed and then filled with a black epoxy. And then it will be hung on a steel rail, and the whole unit will be sealed with a marine grade poly. Moving over to the addition to Walnut Street. It's about 3 feet wide. This is Wild Goose's logo. It's just a routed steel plate, and then it will be painted the wild letters in white. This one also mounted to a bracket that will be going into the block. And it's just, in line with the top of the door frame, like it's sort of walking across.
And just to chime in, the overhead door in the front has been installed. I haven't removed the metal yet. I'm seeking occupancy. I'll be scheduling that inspection for the end of next week, and I'll be opening that door up. It's a black glass garage door that was approved in a previous approval. So that'll be exciting to get that opened up there next week. So we're gonna power wash the building and get it all cleaned up too. So.
Yeah. All right. Any questions for the applicant?
Bill?
Hello?
This is Kim. Kim, can you hear me? Bill?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so I just had a question about lighting. Was there the intention for any kind of lighting for either of the signs? Or is there a light already there over the main one? I can't.
No plan for lighting at this time.
It would be cool to have some kind of industrial lighting, over each of them. That would kind of go with the vibe of the building, but maybe you don't need lighting at night. I don't know.
Yeah, we kicked around the idea of adding some gooseneck lights, which could be helpful. I think just based on our current budget, it's not in this plan, but down the road, we would love to do something like that.
Okay.
That's something that could be staff approved later on? Or would you guys want to see what kind of lights we were?
Not sure if that's within,
I guess
it may be within the purview of staff. Belkis, you could answer that better.
Yeah, so if the board wanted to motion to have any future lighting for the graphics approved by staff, to be reviewed and approved by staff, that's totally within possibility. The board could also say that gooseneck lighting could be reviewed and approved by staff. But yeah, that's something the board could do if you'd like. But traditionally, any future lighting would be an application that would come back to the board.
Yeah, I think the issue with the lighting was that we had already submitted construction documents, everything had been approved. I had already gone through the rough electrical inspections, so there just was not enough time to get this application in and revise drawings, get them back to the city, get those approved. So things just kind of got a little, timing just wasn't really thought out, I guess, in terms of the planning of that. But yeah, I'm totally in favor, and I've been very obviously involved in this project, that I agree that lighting would be very important. In the front, it would be very easy to do because that is a storage mechanical loft above those doors on the inside, and there's a lot of accessible electricity within boxes and things in the ceiling that's exposed in that area, and in the back there is no framing or drywall on the inside, so that could all be, and of course the electrical service is just to the left of the door on the inside, so that would be a super easy add-on. It just wasn't in the stars in terms of trying to get through these inspections with this specific permit, but obviously something can be submitted just with I could have my electrician take care of that. So that's why I think maybe just
You can always get a future application.
Yeah, I would be totally for because we were looking at gooseneck lighting. If we, I would totally be open to resigning it to gooseneck lighting if the staff could approve. So just kind of speed up that process later on. That's all. Not that I don't love coming here, so.
All right. Any other questions?
I mean, I'd be fine pre-approving gooseneck lighting. There's plenty of colors and styles and anything else, but I mean, I think it makes sense for Wild Goose Creative to have goose lighting over the signs that are mounted on the front of their building. I would have no problem if for speed you wanted to get a staff approval on those moving forward and save you a month of time when you were ready to pull the trigger on those.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, TJ, how would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Dang, Bill. Approve the submission as submitted and allow for future lighting to be staff approved with exterior gooseneck lighting.
That'll work.
Second,
Okay. But who gave the second?
Mr. Way.
Mr. Way.
Kim.
Okay.
Kim, we're killing
All
it
right.
today.
Belkis, call the roll, please.
Yes, Dr. Bach,
Yes.
Mr. Agner, are you here? All right, Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred,
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski,
Approve.
and Mr. Way.
Approve.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Chairman.
Thanks.
See ya.
Yeah. Okay, next application, EF 21-06005, 433 West Broad Street. The owner is Gravity 2 LLC, and the applicant is Jessica Shuren, and we're reviewing mixed-use tower lighting. Belka, staff report, please.
Bill, before you do that, I will be recusing myself for this.
That makes perfect
Yes.
sense.
Yes.
Let the record so reflect.
Thank you. All right, so 433 West Broad Street is part of the Gravity 2 mixed-use development within the West Broad
Belkis,
Street.
you're breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry, can you hear me better now?
Still breaking up. Hard to make a good record that way.
I know, I apologize. Can you hear me better now?
Nope.
Oh, hold on one moment.
Now I got you.
Okay. All right, so the applicant is seeking approval for updated exterior lighting for the development's 12-story mixed-use tower. The updated lighting details include light blades within certain windows of the building on the north and east elevations, as well as a different brand of spotlights on the west and north elevations, as the originally selected spotlight was discontinued by the manufacturer. The blade lights are inset into the depth of the window jamb to contain the light within the window surround, and the spotlights do not extend beyond the parapet of the building. Both lights will be on timers with the ability to be automatically turned on and off at certain times. And the submittal includes a site plan, elevations, and materials. So if we go to those, here you just have, your basic first floor plan. And here, if you see, this is the north elevation lighting. You can sort of see this green-blue color here. That's what would be illuminated. Here you see on the east elevation, same thing, this green-blue color of what would be illuminated here. And then going forth, you see the different lighting fixtures proposed there. And then this is a rendering of what it would look like at night with the spotlights over here where the hand is, and then the light blades where my hand is, outlining them. So after review, The proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends that lighting highlight distinguishing characteristics of buildings and be directed downward. Furthermore, the plan states that upward facing lights may be permissible as long as the light spillage does not extend beyond the walls being illuminated. Although some of the proposed lighting emits some light above the horizontal plane, the lighting will not extend past the walls and features being illuminated. The staff recommends that the board discuss the facade lighting as plan recommendations encourage lights to be directed downward, and staff does recommend approval. And if approved, the board will grant the following modifications to the East Franklinton District Development Standard, and one that's to allow a light fixture to be located above the 18-foot height limit for lighting that is located within 100 feet of a residential district, and two, to allow blade lights and spotlights which are directed upwards and above the horizontal plane and are not fully shielded. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Belkis. Any questions for staff? Okay, hearing none. Jessica Shuren, are you with us today?
I am with us, and I also have Katie Vicellio with MBBJ.
Okay, speaking of frequent flyers, welcome. So for both of you, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
I do.
Okay, floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much for the time. Very nice to see you all again. Unfortunately, over camera, not in person, but we'll get there. So we wanted to come back with a few updates. So as Belkis mentioned, the spotlight that we had been discontinued. So this is just a minor modification and update in the spotlight. What you're not seeing on the renderings is that we plan, where we see the spotlight, we do plan to have a mural. So obviously we'll be talking about that again once we get a further down the road and more towards building completion. So that spotlight is really to highlight that mural, especially, in the winter when it's dark at 5 and, there are more dark hours, it seems, than light hours. And then we're returning with a new lighting design for the north and the east sides. And what we realized, and we had talked about this for a long time, and it just took us a while to get to a plan that we were happy with, that we thought wouldn't be super disruptive to our tenants nor to our other neighbors that will have buildings adjacent. But the building is a really, really big building, and we wanted to create some interest from downtown. And we also wanted to tie the language of the light as being an important architectural element with the gravity across the street. And so we worked really hard with MBBJ to find fixtures that we were happy with. This blade light is what you've approved on the office building as well. And MBBJ has worked really hard to ensure that it's not emitting too much light. We're not emitting light into the sky. We're not going to drown out any units. And we're really happy with where we've come to. So bringing it to you for approval. And Katie is here. If you have any technical questions, I will not be able to answer any of those.
Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
So page 11, where you guys did a mock-up, was that done here in town on one of the buildings?
So that was actually done at the MBBJ office. We mocked up a typical window size. So it's 6 feet wide by 9 feet tall. And we actually mounted, we had 2 different kinds of the same fixture. So this is the one that we chose. And you can see where it's mounted at the top, which is what we were proposing, how it really doesn't spill past the frame that it's mounted to, which is at the same depth as the jamb. So yeah, there's the fixture up there at the top. It's about 4.5 inches in diameter, so pretty small. And you can see there's really almost no light bleed whatsoever.
Did you happen to take photographs of what this would be on the house panel? So these would all come on universally at a certain time
Correct.
to create the pattern on the side of the building. The only thing that's kind of difficult for me to kind of see is that the rendering that is on page 7 just looks to my eye like the lights in the units are on, not the lights in the units are off and the lights in the frames of the windows are on. My guess is it would actually have kind of a cooler visual effect if the lights in the units were off and you saw the frames highlighted, because the light would reflect off the glass and it would almost still be dark on the inside of the building. Here it looks like we can see all of the inside of the building as if, you know, the light was projecting into the building off of white walls and white floors, and it looks like that whole building corner is lit.
Yeah, TJ, you're right. You're correct. And go ahead, Katie. I know
so
on our
that's
side.
Sorry, I think there's a delay. Sorry. Go ahead.
So on our side with Kaufman, we wanted to show Brett really what it would look like if everybody had their lights on, what the impact would be. But I think you're right. You know, if everybody has their lights off at 8, or, you know, we're not going to have these on all night, obviously. But if most units have their lights off, I think you're going to see a greater impact. But I'll let Katie kind of speak to that a little bit more since I interrupted her twice.
No, that's completely true. And I think the way when we first presented it, we did show it with lights on the inside of the building, because that is a very, you know, possible condition, right? So we're probably never going to see nobody at home all the time on all stories. So that's how it's shown here. I do have an alternate rendering with more of the lights off on the interior if you're interested in seeing that, and I can share that. But
yeah, I'd love to see it, because this shows the rest of the building as being totally black and vacant. It's hard to actually understand what the lights on the exterior are going to do if there are units that have lit interiors and some that don't have lit interiors. Is the exterior still going to follow your pattern and feel cohesive, or will it kind of get lost? Because I think the pattern's great. I think the lights in your mock-up shows a really distinct line around the window, which is what you guys had presented previously, and was a really neat concept from a fixture standpoint. I want to make sure that in practice, when there are some lights on and some lights off in the building, if it is still shown and noticeable.
Definitely.
well, and it's true. It's a different effect from the surface mounted linear fixture. But we also, we have a whole lot of light effects going on in the courtyard and in the office building. And so I think the idea also from the design team was this creates an effect that is seen from downtown and is seen from the street, but it is, it kind of lets some of the other light stuff happening take a little bit more focus.
That's actually a really neat vantage point. Where you're lower, and it almost looks like as you're driving by it, you're gonna notice it more from a car standpoint or a pedestrian standpoint. As you drive by it, the light lines are going to be much more prominent as you move.
Yeah. Certainly more from an angle than if you see it straight on. If you see it straight on, it's not quite as powerful, but definitely from an angle when you're walking by and from downtown.
TJ, does that rendering help?
Yeah, I think it does. It's hard to see where the lights are on the north face as much. That one shows much better. Yeah.
And it's hard because, you know, this is not reality yet, and we don't know what, you know, how often people are going to have lights on and whatnot. But I do think we're happy with it, and we don't want to spend the money on something that won't be impactful either. And I think we'll get there, but I definitely hear your points, and I think they're very valid.
It's not it's definitely not the bright linear lines that are in Gravity 1. They're much more they're much more mellow. which my questions are not because I'm not for it. I think they're really neat lights, and I think it'll give you a really cool feel. But it's hard to tell from that rendering exactly what we would be approving.
Yeah, understand.
But I also don't imagine that those lights are cheap, and that you would be expecting to get a certain look and feel from the light fixture itself.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And it's interesting because unlike the Gravity Phase 1, where the fixture is actually on an office building, this one we had to contend with, one, the amount of windows, and we want to be super cautious about what we're flooding into resident units.
yeah. And so the Gravity one has the long linear lights on the side of the building, and those are on, if not all the time, pretty long hours.
That's correct.
Because those shoot out and away from residential windows.
Yes.
And not necessarily in. What's the light into the units of these? Are these going to be basically turned off at 9 p.m. or are they going to go until 11 or 2? Is there?
Well, they certainly won't
do
go.
people even notice it on the inside of the unit?
Yeah, so I'll let Katie speak to that, but let me touch on the other piece first. We certainly wouldn't let it go till like 2, but we probably will make a determination with our operations team a little closer to opening, and when we can get in the units, see how they reflect light, whatnot, and obviously like want to be good neighbors, so we're not gonna do anything crazy. But you're right, the office light sculpture is on, if not all the time, close to it. But this one we do have to be a little bit more, we do have to plan and have a little more strategy around on off because of it being residential in nature. And Katie, can you talk a little bit about if any light will spill into the units at all?
So we did the mock-up because I wasn't convinced when we got the cut sheets and heard the pitch about this light, because I'd never seen something cut off that clean that was so small. So that's a big reason why we did it. I think, if you look at the photos in the mock-up, and I took a couple in the shop as well, it's kind of the exact perfect size for that. Yeah. So you can see where it doesn't even go over the edge of the jamb. Like you see maybe like a half-inch kind of grazing past it on the balcony on the right image. It's pretty narrow. So I don't think you will see it in the unit at all. When I was in the office, I couldn't see it with the lights on. So that's our office on the other side of that door. So we set it up in front of the glass so we could see what it did in front of glass as well. And when I was on the inside, I couldn't even tell with the lights on. With the lights off, I think it'll be, this is on the outside, so I don't think we'll have very much bleed.
Yeah, and they'll have interior blinds anyway.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
It seems to me if I'm standing inside in the dark, looking at the stars, this lateral light will diminish that. Or is there so much ambient light there anyway, I'm never going to see the stars?
Well, that's a good question. I think if you're out on, you'd have to be out on your balcony to have a vantage point to see up. And I think that light's behind you then. So I think that light isn't spilling too far, that it's not going to totally prevent you from looking up and seeing stars. So without knowing exactly the build condition, I think that is mitigated.
I do think you'd get almost more light pollution from street lighting and stuff across the street that's actually coming into your field of vision than you would with something like that around you or behind you.
Typically, you got to go 60 miles out of town to see stars anymore.
I know, Dr. Box, I was going to ask where you're stargazing in the city. I've got to come where you are, I guess.
Oh, no. I grew up in Australia and lived in Marysville for 20 years. And when I left Marysville, you could still see stars. We were out in the country.
Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay. Dr. Box has moved. Mr. Manfred has seconded. Motion to approve. Belka, Stafford, call roll, please.
Yes. Dr. Box,
Yes.
Mr. Fergus,
Approve.
Mr. Manfred,
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski,
Approve.
and Mr. Way.
Mr. Way has abstained.
Oh, right. Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
That passes.
Thank you.
See you next
Until next
year.
time. All right. Moving on. Conceptual application. We have one today. It is EF 21-06006, 240 South McDowell Street. CMHA is the owner and Griffin Caldwell is the applicant. And we are conceptually reviewing the Rich and River 2 concept. Belka, staff report, please.
Yes. So the applicant is requesting a conceptual review of the River and Ridge 2 mixed-use development located within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. The project would redevelop the currently vacant blocks bounded by West Ridge Street to the north, McDowell Street to the east, the Dodge Park Recreation Center to the south, and May Avenue to the west. The applicant came before the board in September of 2019 with a conceptual design that included a parking garage just east of Gift Street, a 12-story mixed-use building just north of Dodge Park with a mix of apartments, office, and retail space, and a first-floor uses lining McDowell and May Avenues, and a 4-story residential building fronting West Ridge Street. In comments from the 2019 meeting, the board encouraged the applicant to locate parking away from Gift Street and internally within the site, line the parking with ground floor uses to activate the street, and line West Ridge Street with commercial uses. The board also had questions surrounding any redevelopment of Dodge Park to the south of the site, as well as the potential of extending Sullivan Avenue east to meet McDowell Street. Staff has received feedback that no plans are in place to extend Sullivan Avenue, and that although some plans are in place to upgrade some programming with Dodge Park, the parking lot along the northern edge of the park is heavily used year-round and will remain in place. So the current conceptual development plan includes the following, and that's a 4-story residential building on the south portion of the site with a mix of 114 studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units with a partially covered surface parking lot along with Dodge Park frontage. And then also a 5-story mixed-use building on the north portion of the site with a 1-level parking garage and an amenity deck on top. And included in the building is ground floor retail fronting West Ridge Street with 120 studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom units on floors 2 through 5. And then the building will include ample bicycle parking on site and a design for a scooter corral drop-off area for residents and the public is being identified. And so the total counts are as follows, and that's 4,700 square feet of retail or commercial space, 234 residential units, and 229 parking spaces. And this submittal includes a conceptual site plan, floor plans, site section, and renderings. So if we take a look at the materials, so this is the site here bounded by this red rectangle. So again, Dodge Park is to the south, and then you have Rich to the north, McDowell on the right or east side, and then you have just this little part of May Avenue on the west side. Here is just another general site plan. Again, the northern building with that commercial space and the parking garage behind it, and then you have the southern building with the residential units and then the parking tucked inside. Here are some floor plans for the ground floor and the second floor. And then here are floors 3 through 4 for the building. This is like a enlarged plan showing the walkway, the pedestrian walkway or mews that's in between both buildings, and then the amenity deck with the pool and outdoor area. Here's the section of the site. So this top portion, you see a section running along McDowell. You have, the northern building on the right-hand side leading into the southern building on the left-hand side, and then you see an aerial of that below. And then here, so this page was not included in the original application, so this page was not reviewed as a part of the staff report. So this is new, but we have a couple elevations here and then some conceptual elevations that the applicant can talk about. And then here's one rendering. So this is looking east. So you see River and Rich 1 further down, but this is, the corner of that building looking east. And then this is the other corner of the northern building, but looking west. So McDowell is kind of fronting there with running along West Rich. So those are the materials. And then after review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan. The plan recommends contemporary building design with vertical elements, and that buildings front the street with parking being lined with first floor uses. The plan also recommends that public and private spaces be delineated through the use of landscape, walls, fences, gates, and other methods to denote boundaries and/or buffers. And as such, planning has the following comments and recommendations for the conceptual design. So the following items are consistent with the plan's recommendation, and that's the commercial frontage on West Rich Street, the mix of contemporary materials and the use of balconies on the upper levels, the sidewalks and street trees that line all frontages of the site, and the ground floor walk-up style residential units with stoops on the southern building. And then staff has the following recommendations for the concept, and that's extending ground floor uses of the north building south along McDowell Street. And this will create a consistent frontage of active ground floor uses for these blocks and match the townhome uses to the east side and the street from Rich and River 1. And then flipping the southern building so that the units and building face Dodge Park, and then having landscaping such as trees, shrubs, and or fencing along the southern frontage to delineate the difference between the Dodge Park parking lot from the development. And then also to consider all access to the parking garage off of West Cherry Street or May Avenue, so there isn't a curb cut along McDowell, removing the elevated walkway between the north and south building to encourage more street activity, and then including the patio and outdoor lounge as listed uses. And those are the ones that are along the West Rich building service and retail frontage. So for this one, there isn't an official recommendation for a vote. It's just conceptual, but those are our recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Bilkis. Any questions for staff?
Bill, this isn't a question, but I'd just like to say that I think staff nailed the comments. I agree with all of those suggestions. So really good stuff.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments before we bring on the applicant? If not, let's go for the applicant. Griffin Caldwell, are you here?
Is it Brent Sobchak with Casto?
Okay. Brent, anybody else speaking today?
Yeah, Paul Glowacki from Dimmitt Architects.
Okay, Paul, if you'd identify yourself.
Good afternoon. Paul Glowacki from Dimmitt Architects here.
Okay, thank you. Gentlemen, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give today is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
I do.
Okay, floor is yours.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And before we get started, I'm glad everyone liked the Slingshot. I think it's going to be pretty cool and unique for the neighborhood. So, yeah, Belkis did a great job summarizing it. It's been a while since we've been here, 2019. Obviously, a lot has changed. We kind of took a step back during the pandemic, kind of looked at what happened in the market, kind of what was going on at River and Ridge Phase 1. Kind of looked at some of the comments we received in our last version and tried to adapt. Obviously, the scale is reduced and the density is reduced, and looking to set aside some additional land for a future phase. I would like to kind of turn it over to Paul here in a second and kind of work through the plan and the design thoughts, but I think what we've done to try to react to some of that McDowell activation, we tried to mirror what is existing on McDowell, and what's existing on Rich, especially the corner of Rich and McDowell, trying to create that commercial corner with a restaurant there on the corner, and eventually, hopefully, that would have more of a patio space. And then as you go down McDowell, we tried to align the garages. So visually, there's not units looking into a garage. And then we stepped the scale down as we went back onto the site to align with the townhouses, the 3-story townhouses, and put ground floor units back there. So that was kind of the thought process on McDowell. And as you, I think it's probably best now to turn it over to Paul and let him kind of walk through. And then really, as we mentioned, we're here to get some feedback. And then we can touch on the thought process on the courtyards and the reason why we believe that the shape of the buildings and the direction of those courtyards makes sense to us, and go from there. So Paul, I'll let you get started.
Sure. Thanks, Brent. Appreciate that introduction. So yeah, as Brent mentioned, we took a pretty good look at the kind of the scale of the buildings surrounding and kind of internal to the site, and broke down the kind of super block into 2 buildings that are somewhat distinct from each other, but also have some complementary architecture. As mentioned, we really focused a lot of the retail and the common spaces for the apartment building up towards Rich Street to kind of continue that language down Rich Street, and then kind of pairing the parking behind that, and then residential, of course, above that. As we saw in the earlier plan, the parking really does start to align much more with the neighboring buildings. I think we're actually bringing that south building even a little bit north of where the townhomes start across the street. But really that front building is more like a podium style building. So the residential above, the pool and deck internal to it. So obviously all the units surrounding the perimeter of the building have good views out to the street, creating some activity there, but then also those internal units then look into that common space. And then additionally on that south building, that's just a 4-story building. So we're stepping on the scale as we go down the street and out towards the park. Those units on the north side of that building have a view down into that pedestrian corridor that runs between the 2 buildings, and then internally to the amenity pool deck area. So we think there'll be some really nice activity along that pedestrian way there. We have some access points that'll probably be secured up to the pool area, but at least create some breakdown in the parking garage, the kind of the south side of the parking garage wall that is along that pedestrian mews. We're trying to really create that as a pedestrian friendly area. And so that kind of breaks down in scale. There's some landscaping, there's some access points up to the upper portion. And I think on both the east-west side, we have some pieces that actually step down about half height to kind of give you a little bit of a lower scale, especially at those ends of the building, right when you're entering into the pedestrian mews space. There are units in that south building that open directly out to the pedestrian mews. Also on that, I believe it's that northeast corner is the main entry to that building. So we'll have the south building will have kind of its own entry lobby, mail, package concierge, that type of thing, that addresses McDowell Street, and I think creates a really kind of a nice pedestrian entry to that muse space there. And then as we go down on both sides of that building on McDowell, and then on the opposite side on the west elevation, all those units are proposed to have at grade access little patios, and have kind of like that very similar feel that the townhomes have across the street, to really break down the scale of the building, the pedestrian experience along there, and create a little bit more of a friendly pedestrian experience as you're moving south towards the park. That building is also kind of designed, differently. It's not a podium style building, so it's going to have a lower scale. We'll look at the elevations in a second, but the interior courtyard of this building is proposed to be at grade parking with a kind of a rim of parking that's tucked under the building. So that would be that dark gray area. So all of the parking is actually tucked under the units that are above. To kind of speak to the conversation about which way we have this building flipped, we are trying to give essentially every unit in this proposal a really nice view. We talked about the north building, the south building. The idea really is that the units on the outer part of the U will have kind of those street level views out towards the river. And additionally, the interior courtyards, which are kind of always those ones that you turn your back on, those are actually going to have really nice views of the park and the river as well. You can kind of see we have the kind of the scale of that courtyard, the width of that courtyard allows for some nice vistas out. So you're kind of really looking out over the parking and then into the park and the river beyond. We did look at a concept where we had it flipped around. And unfortunately, then really all of those interior courtyard units really then just have a view of the parking and really the pool beyond. And so we're trying to give those some nicer views and create a little bit more, I think, activity on those facades. If we can go to maybe the elevation slide. So quickly to kind of run you through the elevation, I think you see this a bit in the renderings. The Rich Street elevation, we're taking some of the language that happens further down Rich to the east and kind of really breaking that scale down. So the materials really are kind of just envisioned as brick and metal panel and obviously a lot of glass. And that'll be refined as we continue to move forward. There are some balconies kind of more in a little playful arrangement. And it's the same thing with kind of the brick breakdown, the metal panel breakdown. It's not, really a formulaic, very rigid, layout of those. They have a little bit more playfulness. And then the building in plan is kind of broken into the two side portions, and then the middle portion that actually protrudes out. And of course, that middle massing has the main entry to the apartment building with a kind of a two-story element that I think kind of helps break down that facade a little bit more. But really then it does keep that street edge there, but it allows some relief, I think, in kind of the mass of the building. Somebody walking down the street, that pedestrian experience, I think, is a little bit more gracious, and just gives a little bit more of that pedestrian scale on what could could be a massive building. So really just trying to break that down quite a bit. And then of course, as we're coming down the side street, the two buildings then really start to break down in scale. So that, podium building on McDowell then breaks down as you go into the Muse space. There's that kind of like lower level of the Muse space, and then the open pedestrian experience. And then the building to the south is at 4 stories. We're kind of relating a lot of those same materials from that front building, and then bringing in a ribbed metal panel to replace the brick, but kind of, again, that same playful nature, and then creating really what we hope is a really nice pedestrian experience with the base of this building kind of being separated from the upper portion, having the entrance to the units again there, as we mentioned. And then if we could look at the renderings quickly. So I think this, these two renderings kind of give you that breakdown. You can kind of see it as you're moving down the street. The rear buildings being in that 4-story scale, but I think even here on Rich Street, the breakdown of the massing of the building, the one massing has kind of the brick all 5 stories. And once you get to kind of more towards the west on this corner here, that building's getting broken down even a little bit more in that materiality. Again, trying to really keep that street edge, create a really nice pedestrian experience, which I think already exists there, and extending that, pulling that down Rich Street. I think that hopefully I hit on most of the points. Glad to answer any further questions that you might have.
Questions for applicant?
So I'll just throw one out because it's one of the things that my first reaction was the flipping of the U. I don't know if we can go back to a plan. I guess you were making the argument that by keeping the U's the way that you have them, that more units have views of the river. And I guess I'm not convinced of that.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've done an analysis of which units have a view, or you talked about vistas. I'm not quite sure what the vistas, where they are of the river, but
yeah, my belief and reasoning behind the U facing this way is trying to create the best courtyard on that north building and the best amount of market rate units, or units that will be best received in the market around that amenity space. Because where we're at on this site and the experience we have on phase 1, the best units or the most desirable units and the highest price points are the units that kind of enclose the amenity space on Rich Street and the 3-story townhouses. The least desirable ones are actually the ones that sit up along the river. They've been our hardest to lease. And I think really what you've got some view, and as you move further west over here, your view truly is of 70-71 split. As you get up, you're looking out at the freeway, not as much on the river. So I think for us, it's maximizing the return on those units around the courtyard and trying to minimize what's facing the freeway as much as possible.
But I guess you would also have to say that it's not just the river views, but Dodge Park is a community amenity. I think units that are facing, that are on the park would feel like they have a very nice setting because of that as an open space.
I mean, that's a parking lot, in my opinion, what they're looking at there. So essentially they're looking at this parking lot or the freeway. They're going to capture a glimpse. There's that lookout tower that's kind of out there. But
which parking lot are you talking about? The one
the Dodge Park parking lot.
Oh, there it is.
Yep.
Okay, I see the park pointer.
And then as that McDowell Street kind of ramps up and it kind of goes up the levee, there's additional parking on that. That's kind of my thought process and how we looked at it. And that was kind of when I alluded to kind of how we've reacted to what we've had, just more information from phase 1 and kind of what's being received by the market and what's desired. How much of that is COVID impact versus kind of what will be in the future, that to be determined.
Yeah, those were the things with River Rich 1 that if you remember, I was most concerned about was that the river edge and how you created activity and that units were on that edge, kind of relating to the river walk and all that stuff. And there's going to be more investment made in the river over the years, and so it's going to become more and more of an amenity. And then my other concern was the parking, the 1-story deck in River Rich 1.
Yeah.
And, you know, the McDowell, or the East Franklinton plan, I was just trying to look for the language specifically and I couldn't find it, but actually, the guidelines are that there isn't parking fronting onto McDowell. And because that was a one level deck in River Ridge 1, I think we kind of looked at it differently. But I think this is a whole different animal. And I really agree with staff that, and I don't want to call it a retail edge, but a ground level activated edge on McDowell in that the first block is, I think, really critical. And then I love the fact that you've got the housing coming down to grade in the other block. So anyway.
Yes. Okay. Kim, I think slide 9 shows that pretty well, where you have an entire kind of dead corner there that is the hidden parking structure
Right.
on the corner of McDowell and Rich. That whole corner is kind of a dark shadow area instead of bringing people out and being activated.
You know, I've been on the board for a long time, and I keep bringing up over and over again that McDowell Street is the only street that runs through East Franklinton from Broad to the river, and it should be a connector from Gravity all the way through. So, you know, activation of that street and, you know, trying to make it into that connection, I continue to think is a really important.
Fair point.
What is in the north building, what is the building services section on that first floor? There's no nice entrance to that. There's no call out. Is that space designated for something? Is it, the rendering is also a little misleading.
So we haven't quite defined.
The site plan
we haven't
doesn't
quite
really match
defined
the rendering on that. All the landscaping that is shown on the rendering in front of that space, which isn't really there on the site plan.
Yeah, we looked at a couple of options there. We looked at possibly bringing some of the building amenity spaces down from the upper floor, maybe a fitness fronting, you know, like the first 20 feet of it, and then mechanical, electrical services for the building kind of tucked in behind that. But we haven't quite fully defined that as of.
I mean, the mechanical services on the first floor on Rich with behind storefront.
No, behind it would. So the first 20 feet of it would be activated with some building use, and then the you know, behind that would be the mechanical space. So yeah, not directly on Rich Street with that. No.
For building uses, I mean, like amenity space or fitness center or something that would be shown from Rich Street that would be utilized as I mean, Kim's word is, you know, activating the street there and being able to show that people are in there and using it.
Correct. It would be some activated space. We just haven't defined kind of how it flows with what we have going on in the second floor and exactly where we're putting it.
You know, while we're looking at this rendering, I mean, even the McDowell Street, the streetscape, you know, is where you're putting the grass or some kind of a lawn up against the parking garage. You know, again, it's counter to what I think should happen there. I think the Rich Street streetscape should wrap around, and I think even the TJ mentioned the renderings look very dark and you know, just doesn't look like an active friendly place. It looks kind of almost very inward oriented, and maybe it's just the brightness of the renderings or whatever, the lighting that they used in the renderings, and I know that can be played with, but I'd really love to. And by the way, I think the architecture, I have no problem with the architecture. I think the way that you've modulated the materials and the masses and you know, I think that all works really well. It's just that ground level is not singing right now. Is not kind of like, you know, evoking this kind of people place. And I think that's what the McDowell and Rich intersection and going back, you know, going along Rich and along McDowell should be.
I agree with Kim on the architecture. I think the architecture on both buildings works pretty well. How you're scaling back the architecture on the southern building, but still picking up the elements of it, I think makes all the sense in the world. I'm a little disappointed for moving away from the 12-story building. I get it from a feasibility standpoint, but having looked at it and being excited about a 12-story building on that entire block is, I think, much more what the neighborhood and the energy wants, as opposed to 2 4-story apartment buildings with very, very minimal retail. You know, I would argue that the architecture looks good. The site plan, you know, making that turning the one building on the south in a U and kind of stretching that, it's hard to do an amenity space there. If you were to match the second building with the first building and have a podium on the south, and then you could really stretch your amenity and podium space between both buildings. There's cost there, obviously. I don't mind hiding the parking from and joining the Dodge Park parking and hiding it from the amenity space on the northern building. And you've got one rendering that shows, or one picture that shows kind of a glass walkway possibly between buildings over to that amenity space. I think that's a great way to kind of join the two buildings. But I think my big concerns would be kind of echoing what Kim said. I think that the site plan and the renderings don't quite jive. There's not as much retail or activity space on the first floor of the building on Rich and specifically on McDowell, as you come south on McDowell, that we would kind of like to see, and we urged for even the 12-story building previously. My only other concern would be that thoroughfare between the buildings that are a pedestrian-friendly walkway. I think in practice and in sales now, that sounds great. In reality, that's all going to have to be pretty well locked down and secure from a security standpoint. So I think you're going to lose some of the open walkway courtyard feel when you guys decide that from a safety and security standpoint, and to maximize your rents, as you guys kind of had pointed to, you're going to want more security than less, and you're not going to want the neighborhood strolling up those stairs and enjoying the deck. If you do, I'm all for it. I think it would be great to invite people into some of that space, but this is a much more private development than the larger building with multiple business on facing forward and on the front street frontages. This is much more of a private apartment complex that is less open to the neighborhood and pedestrians.
This is staff. Ryan or Judy, do you have any comments?
Judy, do you want to go
I'm
first?
good. I've been listening. I'm agreeing with everybody. This is a tough job for somebody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Judy. Ryan?
I guess, I have less of an issue with the McDowell. I think that there's more to be done. Some of it can be done through architecture, but if I'm doing my math correctly, was looking at the floor plan, you have about probably, I think it was 8 to 9 parking spots. So you probably have about 80 or 90 feet from the garage entrance of there that we're talking about activation. I think that there's probably some happy compromise there. I mean, you do have to have service entry in the garage, and they brought it back turning the corner. Yeah, so if you look at there, I think is there maybe 9 or 10 parking spots there after the garage. And so I guess I agree with TJ and Kim and Tape looking to see if there's a little bit activated there. I'm not as set on that. That whole thing has to be storefront. I being a developer itself and understanding retail and taking retail off a main street on a dead end, I'd rather see that nicely landscaped and a little bit there than empty storefronts that you can't lease. So I'm a little bit different on that view. I think some of it could be accomplished by bringing the architecture down to the ground level so it doesn't look like it's just the architecture on top of a podium, and some of that activates it, and maybe there's an entrance into the garage there, a pedestrian entrance, something like that. So I'm probably a little easier to appease on that part. I do agree with TJ's comment that would really want to understand and see more activity in that building services. I think the rendering shows people sitting out there and, just putting a fitness center in there might not accomplish that same type of thing. So I would push for more active retail there on Rich Street where it's, in my opinion, more viable. And if you have that activity along Rich, I'm a little bit less concerned on McDowell, like we said. But I overall like the architecture. I could go either way on the courtyard orientation of the second building. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Ryan.
Is there an ability, if we went to slide 3, is there a possibility of moving what is now on McDowell, the drive lane in and out, to south on May Avenue? So you've got 2 entrances on May. That there is a one-way alley in, not coming out onto McDowell on the current River and Rich project, that kind of drive lane that runs past the parking garage. There's also, I guess, a little concern there of having that be 2-way in and out as close to the alley, or as close to the corner right there on Rich from McDowell, which may, if we're talking about opening up that corner a little bit, may be able to be alleviated, or could be moved south more to open up that corner.
Yeah, and TJ, and I guess that's where I guess I was kind of hey, you could do something like that from a traffic, move that down a little bit, turn that retail so it turns a little bit more for the south. The drive aisle moves down a little bit. So now that blank facade we're talking about goes from 90 feet to 50 feet. Yeah. And you had a pedestrian entrance into that garage there. There's some activity. Like, I understand the developer's point of view.
That whole corner where we've got seven trees and the sidewalk on that McDowell corner would be a really nice outdoor seating cafe corner, and then that entrance and exit to the garage could be pushed more to the south.
I agree.
And that would help wrap that corner a little more.
Yep.
I would just add, again, we keep talking about retail, and I keep talking about ground level activity. I'm not trying to push more retail, but there's got to be uses that you can put there that activate that and create that. And again, I agree. One simple move would be to wrap the retail around the corner and bring it down a portion of the way. But I guess that's not far enough for me. I would advocate that whole edge needs to be activated. And maybe, can you put residential, at least there to be people on the ground floor like you have on the other building, or maybe it's a mixture of both.
Mm-hmm.
And one other question, I guess, the future development, could we just assume that you would do just another U-shaped building on that? And so that's also a condition that we should think about as we're evaluating this, or might that be something totally different?
I don't know. Given the scale of the single family on Gift Street and still kind of unknown with Dodge Park as kind of what that long-term plan is and if there's going to be any changes there. I wouldn't want to say that we're looking at a U, but we also haven't given too much thought to it. I think there's an opportunity for the property potentially to the north of Cherry, and is there a way that gets brought into some future development?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if we were dividing it up into 3 blocks, I'd probably be much more keen to have these 2 buildings on the, the one on the south, the U on the south, moved west onto that future development TBD, and have that corner for a slightly larger block that could kind of anchor the 3 buildings of the, maybe not the 12-story building that you had originally proposed, but a 6 or 8-story building that would be flanked by the 4-story buildings on the other sides, and that would kind of be a nice anchor, and it would be away from what are the smaller residential buildings to the west.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I mean, part of it too with what we had lined up from the kind of infrastructure package with the city doesn't exist anymore, and the improvements that were going to happen with Cherry and May and McDowell to some extent, this plan at least allows that opportunity to come into play in the future and somewhat keeps the potential grid intact. So that's kind of, I guess, part of the thought process as well here.
And I didn't look at the numbers, but does this meet the new parking code, Belkis?
Let me go to that. Let's see. I put that in here. Parking.
Yeah.
Okay, so 300 right now with I was going to get to this, but the East Franklinton special parking area passed City Council on Monday. So that's going to go into effect July 22nd. And so that means that really these parking calculations don't matter anymore because after this meeting, the board parking will be taken out of the board's hands and put into the hands of building and zoning services. So the special parking area requires 266 parking spaces for what's currently proposed, and then they are proposing 229 parking spaces. So, I would have to do some math outside of this meeting, but essentially, with the pay in lieu fee, you can only buy out of a certain number of spaces for residential and a certain number of spaces for retail commercial, and then if you go above that, essentially the director has to do a special approval or something like that. So really, you'd want to stay within the range of the pay in lieu fee, I would say. But that's a different conversation for a future time.
Because I just wondered if that new regulation would impact what we're looking at today, and would the developer be thinking differently?
Yeah, it would. They, you'd have to go and look at the design, and first you'd have to do the math and see if they're short any number of spaces for that pay in lieu fee. And then if they are, and they would need to provide a little bit of additional parking, that might kind of change some of the design.
Kim, is your question regarding timing of submittal?
What's that?
Kim, is your question though more on the timing of submittal and when the special parking takes?
Well, it was that that just got passed. So would that, and this was designed with that not thinking about that restriction. So now would that restriction change the way that they're thinking about this, because now they're thinking about parking differently? And there is a timing issue, yes.
Yeah, the answer to your question, Kim, is yes. Yeah. I would think so.
Well, Bo, because and maybe I have a different question than Kim, or maybe it's the same, but when we talked
Sure.
about that parking, was that there was going to be an odd period of when it was approved, and if something was submitted before or submitted within, like when it goes into effect, and I think that's the question. That's at least the question that I have.
Okay, yeah, I got what you're saying. So the new legislation goes into effect on July 22nd. The next meeting that the board is going to have is July 28th. So that means that although this is submitted, it's just a conceptual application. It's not up for a vote. So really, this is the last meeting that the board could approve any type of parking reductions.
Okay.
But since this is just conceptual, you know, the parking or anything like that can't be approved. So if this were to come back next month for a vote, that application would be under the East Franklinton Special Parking Area rules and regulations.
That was the question. Okay.
Did I explain that? Okay, or do you understand?
Perfect.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And I guess I just wanted to make sure that that was clear to the applicant, that they understood that part.
That's what I was going to, Ryan, also.
Okay.
Yeah, and I spoke, Griffin was the applicant, and I've spoken with him on the phone about that outside of this meeting.
Okay, any further comments, folks? If not, I hope that gives you some guidance and good luck dealing with the new parking regulations.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate the feedback, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Bye.
Okay, let me quickly read a couple staff approved applications into the record. First one is EF 2106001, 461 West Rich Street. CMHA is the owner, Brian Collins the applicant, and Maker's Social Sidewalk Dining Patio was approved. The other is EF 2106002, Public Sidewalk at 424 and 410 West Town Street. Kramer Engineers, John Miller is the applicant, and the installation of electric vehicle charger stations was approved. Last on the agenda, Belkis, you have any more to add on that, on our special parking area update?
That's essentially, you know, what I was going to say is what I just said, but, you know, the new code and rules and regulations will go into effect on July 22nd. So that means that next month, the board will not need to review or approve or debate on parking. So all of that will be out of your hands. And then this is the ordinance. So I'll email this to all of you right after this meeting, just so you can review it and understand, you know, what the passage means and all of that. But do you all have any questions for me right now?
Probably best off getting a look at the legislation. Then if we have any questions, we can raise it at the next meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can email me, you know, at any time, and I can loop in Jackie Yeoman as well, who's been working closely on this project with Public Service. So yeah, we're an open book, so just let us know. And yeah, that's all I wanted to say about that.
Belkis, the bottom line is that the applicants are going to have a parking requirement, and that's what they will plan and design around, and we will review. We do not give any kind of concessions for parking, correct?
Correct, yes.
Correct.
So the board will no longer be able to modify parking.
Yeah, I just love to state the obvious, but I just wanted to
Pop
state
the
it.
champagne, Kim.
No, that's good.
As long as I've been on the board, it's the one thing that's been bugging me. So I'm so happy.
I know.
Tell.com, all right?
And
Captain Obvious.
someone finally listened.
Yay.
And Belkis,
Okay.
will we see you at the University Impact District this month then? You said this.
Yeah. So Patrick's going to be with me tomorrow. He wrote the staff report and everything, but I'm going to present tomorrow just to get in the swing of things and interact with that board. And then in July, I'll be doing UIDRB solo, and then I'll be doing East Franklinton as well in July. And then I believe Stephanie may take over East Franklinton starting in August. But obviously Jackie and I will be with her, and we're not going anywhere, so she won't be alone.
Are we back in person next month?
Yeah, so I think in July, I'm pretty darn sure we're going to be back in person in July, unless by some crazy chance the state extends, that law or, the thing that they passed to allow this to happen. But that expires July 1st. So unless they did something to make it extend further, we will be back in person and, all of that. And the hearing room has been set up in a way that we can all do that and also stream to YouTube as well. But everything will be in person, and anyone who wants to participate or speak during a meeting will have to attend in person. They'll just be able to watch via YouTube and not participate, but just watch if they want to.
All right. Well, good. And we have one more month with you, Belkis.
Yeah.
And with that, unless anybody has anything to add for the good of the order here, I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Have a good afternoon,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye. Have a good.
Enjoy the summer.
Thank you.